Hello friends, so today's video is going to be on the topic of whether or not readers should give writers advice. I think there are several different facets to this conversation, and I also want to provide a little bit of, I guess you could say, backstory to me, because that is going to give you insight as to why I feel the way I feel, because there are going to be differing opinions on this topic, and I want you to really kind of be able to take a peek into my head and understand why I feel the way I feel, but also feel comfortable voicing whether it's an agreement or a disagreement. I want you to feel comfortable voicing your own opinions in the comments. I will have timestamps down below if you would like to skip ahead to any particular aspect of this conversation. I am going to start with the background as to why I am going to be influenced when it comes to certain things. So if you don't know, I majored in music education. So that's kind of like a double major, because you do have to go to where I went to school anyway, which is a major university. You have the School of Music, and then you have the education school. And you do have to take classes from both, and you have to take classes in child development and diversity in the classroom and all of those sorts of things, as well as music. And I specifically had an emphasis in strings pedagogy. I played violin, and I wanted to be able to teach more. I started teaching private lessons when I was in high school. I started tutoring the incoming freshmen, and then kind of took off from there. I always wanted to be a teacher, but I fell in love with teaching violin, which I never thought I was actually going to do. I thought I would go into maybe like math or history or something like that, because I really enjoyed those. But it kind of stole my heart, and I decided I wanted to major specifically in music ed. However, music education degrees, at least where I live, when you get your degree, you are certified to teach kindergarten through 12th grade, which is the end of high school. And you are not only certified to teach any grade level, but you are certified to teach any form of music. I think that that is ridiculous. I really had a problem with that. I remember thinking, I am not qualified to teach anything except for maybe a strings class or a general music class to little kids or something like that. But I am most definitely not educated enough. Even after 4 years, I am not educated enough to teach a band class or a guitar class or a choir class, especially not at a higher level. And I just could not believe that that was something that we were not only certified to do, but it was kind of encouraged to just get your foot in, kind of put your foot in the door to get you started, and then maybe eventually you can make your way to the position you really want. I hated that. I hated that so much. So I was like, no, if I ever get offered a job to teach in a school, I will not accept it unless it is something that I feel I am qualified to teach, which is, like I said, strings or general music. But I did have a big heart for private violin teaching, which is what I did up until basically my father passed away, and I was his caretaker in the last few months of his life. So I had been teaching private lessons for a very long time, and I felt comfortable with it, and I loved it. But another aspect to all of this is when I was in school, I did not have the easiest childhood. I had to definitely work a lot harder because I had a lot of things at home that just made my life a little more difficult. So I was so ready to finally not only pursue something that I loved, but to be taught by the best of the best, and to be surrounded by other people who were also interested in pursuing something that I was passionate about, and just being elevated because everybody has a shared goal of excelling in this thing that you all love. And even though I had a scholarship, because I went to a major university, it was still very expensive. My scholarship did not cover everything. So even though thousands and thousands of dollars of tuition were taken care of, I still had thousands and thousands of dollars to pay every year, every semester. And so I worked a lot while I was in school, because I really did not want my life to be as stressful as it was as a kid. I wanted to have, I wanted to feel more comfortable in my adult life, and I just wanted to have a little pocket of peace, if you will, as I got older. When I entered university, I discovered it wasn't exactly what I expected it to be. And while I did have some fantastic professors, I also had quite a few classes taught by TAs, which I understand that that's currently the setup in a lot of universities. It is what it is. And no shade to TAs. I think a lot of them are doing the best that they can. But I want to give you an example of a class that I was kind of furious, because I, at one time, was working 5 different part-time jobs while going to school and having an internship. And I was so frustrated that the person teaching the class was less qualified than I was to teach it. So because you're certified to teach any form of music when you get your music education degree, that means that you take these classes that sort of help you learn other instruments. And these classes are a semester long, so you definitely do not have enough information to teach those at a higher level. But regardless, the class that I was very serious about was low strings, because I play violin, and a lot of violin techniques are very similar for viola, so I could kind of see that. But when it came to low strings, cello and bass, there are still a lot of aspects of those instruments that are similar, but then of course there are things that are different. And so I was really passionate about learning more when it came to cello and bass, and the person teaching the class didn't play cello and bass. They played brass instruments. And I was sitting there like, I could better illustrate for the class how to do everything that we're doing right now. I was so frustrated, especially because, one, I had that view that when I was going to go to university, I was going to be taught by the best of the best, but two, because I was paying thousands of dollars and I was working so hard, and having that money, it felt like it was just flying out the door. It felt so useless and pointless, to the point where I almost dropped out of school because I was so stressed and I felt like I wasn't actually getting my money's worth out of my education. There's one more aspect to my time in college that I want to mention, and that would be one of the many jobs that I had while I was in college was working for something called the Strings Project, which was where the students at the university would teach. Usually it was kids who financially weren't able to get lessons. The university would kind of help out, pitch in a little bit, and help these kids get lessons from university students. I thought that was great. I often taught people for a discounted price. Sometimes I even taught students for free when their families weren't doing well. And so I loved this opportunity. And I remember there was a student who had signed up who played cello. And the current cellists who were university students, their schedules were too full to teach this one cello student. So I was assigned this cello student. Reminder again, while there is some overlap, cello and violin are different. And I remember talking to one of the professors who I do adore. I remember talking to them being like, I don't know if I feel comfortable teaching this cellist. And they told me, well, it's basically teach this cellist or this cellist gets no lessons. So it was kind of a it's better than nothing sort of situation. So I did the best that I could in that situation, but I always felt, even knowing that they were probably getting financial assistance in some way, I just kept thinking, I wish this student could be with somebody who is better educated in this instrument and who is just a better player of this instrument. I wish they had that person as their teacher. And like I said, I mean, they were a beginner, so it ended up being fine, but I hate that. I hate when people don't get their hard-earned money's worth out of what they're paying for. It always really, it sucks, especially if you've ever been in a situation where you've been financially struggling. You know that money matters, especially for parents who are trying to, maybe they don't have a lot, but they're trying to provide the most opportunities as possible for their children. Anyway, so that gives you a little bit of insight into how I view these sorts of topics. There's, of course, nuance to every situation, and there is not necessarily a right and wrong answer. There's also going to be exceptions depending on the circumstances. But the three main things that I wanted to touch on in relation to readers giving writers advice would be within book reviews in general on the internet, whether they be through blogs or articles or in video format, and then also readers charging writers for their opinions and input. I'm going to start with reviews. So in the past, I think there was a little bit more of this is the way things are when it came to readers and authors. Authors wrote books, readers reviewed them. And we're kind of seeing the gap between authors and reviewers closing a little bit because of how connected authors are encouraged to be to their fan bases, whether that be through Twitter or Instagram or doing interviews or even joining them on videos sometimes. And I'm not going to go too in detail as to whether it's appropriate or not, and the reviewer and author spaces conversation. I'm not really going to go into detail about that. I'm going to stick to the idea that there's this shift now where it's sort of like the job of the reviewer is not to provide their opinion of the book or their feelings toward the book, but rather some people have this idea that the review is there to help the author. There are many professional writers who have touched on this. Many professional writers encourage people to not look at reviews, although not every writer is going to feel that way. But generally, it's kind of I wouldn't even say it's an unspoken rule. It's pretty widely spoken among authors to don't look at your reviews. Just don't do it. Trust your editor, trust your team. And obviously this is going to be slightly different depending on whether the author is traditionally published or self-published, but I perhaps hold the view that you have an order of things that you can do to try and get people's opinions before a book is out. So a lot of times when, not just self-published, but sometimes traditionally published too, you have people who are your critique partners. You have people who are also writers, and you swap manuscripts and you give that person your opinions, your insight as a fellow writer, and they do the same for you. So you have critique partners. You also have beta readers, which are people who voluntarily read your work and give you their thoughts. Sometimes they have specific questions to answer that the author has provided, and sometimes they can give more of a vague, here's my feelings about all of this. And you also have different kinds of professional edits that you can get. A professional edit, I think some people are under the impression that it's just going around and making sure there's no typos, and that's not true. There are so many different kinds of editing, some of which is developmental in nature. It's all about the structure and, okay, well, this character behaved this way here, and now they're acting this way. This seems a little out of character. Editors do a lot. They do a lot for you. I did a video a little while back that I'll have linked. It's about authors who were originally self-published and then eventually were picked up by traditional publishers. And those authors, I often had clips of them providing some of their experiences, having started as self-published, one of which was an author who wrote The Wolf of Oren-Yaru. And obviously, all of us love to say, make sure you get your book edited. And she did discuss how sometimes that is just not an option and you have to do the best that you can on your own. So I don't want to have this blanket statement of, well, if you're going to write a book, you better get it edited, because I understand that that's not always financially feasible. But generally speaking, most manuscripts do get edited. With beta readers, there is a conversation to be had as to whether or not beta readers should be free or paid. That's a different conversation. But currently, beta readers are people who offer for free to read your work and give you their opinions. And when they do this, as the author, you don't take in every single individual opinion and then try to work that in. You kind of see what are the main things that are being consistently said. Is everybody saying this part's too fast-paced? Is everybody saying this part's confusing? You look at what the majority is saying, and then you make adjustments there. Nowadays, there's also sensitivity readers that go through and try to make sure that you're not saying anything or doing anything that is actually really offensive. Based off of what I discussed earlier, this should probably be no surprise, but if you're a reviewer and you're a reviewer as somebody who just likes to read, you don't have a formal education in creative writing or in manuscript critiquing or in English, and you just don't have any kind of formal certification, you are not more qualified than author's editor. I feel really bad saying that, but you're just a person with opinions about a book that you read for fun. And if you want to provide help to the author beforehand, then sign up for a beta read. The next part of this is just in general for free on the internet, whether it be in video format or on somebody's blog. I'm generally a big advocate of the more information at your disposal, the better, the more tools in your tool belt, if you will. I think that that's a good thing. So gaining information from readers and seeing what readers are saying and what readers like and don't like, I don't think there's harm in that. Perhaps the only time that it could be a problem is if you only see what readers have to say and you maybe never even take into consideration the craft of writing or how to actually write the book, because they're two very different things. Having opinions on a book versus how to write a book are very, very different. And I think that because a lot of us who are bookworms we, not all, of course, but a lot of us, we did pretty well in school. We maybe weren't super popular. Our thing was being into books and being kind of one of the smart kids, right? That's what a lot of readers were. Not all, again, there's readers of all different backgrounds and with different interests and things like that. But so many of us kind of fancy ourselves a little more on the intellectual side. And then also, many of us wrote essays in high school and college, and just in general in school, we wrote essays. And so because we've had experience with the concept of writing something, and because we also tend to think of ourselves a little bit more on the intelligent side, I think sometimes there's this little extra bit of confidence that we could write a book if we put our mind to it. And writing a book is very difficult. There's so much more that goes into it than writing a research paper or writing a persuasive essay or writing something for standardized tests. It's a very different process. And so I understand the irony in me saying, should readers give writers advice? And I'm kind of sort of just, I wouldn't say I'm giving advice, but it's like a lot of like, this is my opinion, what I think you should do. I realize there's some irony in that. But if you are somebody who is an aspiring author, I think it's great to see what readers have to say, but I also think it's great to see what writers have to say. And then also, at some point, there are some instincts that you're going to have that you should probably lean into. And so what I mean by that is somebody like Brandon Sanderson, who does teach at BYU, is probably going to give very different writing advice to someone like Stephen King. One of them is known for being a plotter, and one of them is known for being a pantser, which means that they write more on like, it's like you write the story as it comes to you instead of plotting it all out. Some people think like, well, I want to be a plotter, but that's just not really what works best for them. So I would also say, see what different writers are saying, and you have to try and figure out what works best for you. So yeah, I think it's not a bad thing to see what readers are saying, but also I think it's important to equip yourself with the information that professionals are providing. Once again, kind of the same thing. What are the professionals saying? When somebody is approaching like, here's how to do something, you sort of have to take it with a grain of salt if they themselves haven't done it. Before continuing on with this point, I just want to add that it's very easy nowadays for people to find, for example, I mentioned Brandon Sanderson. He has his lectures up for free on YouTube. It's very easy for people to watch those and then make their own videos where they say the exact same things, but they kind of pass that information off as their own, which ultimately provides you with the same bit of information. But again, one is coming directly from the source, where another is just kind of a filtered down version. The best way I can articulate this in another art form, going back to the music example, if I am trying to get better at my violin and another violinist who is better or more experienced gives me their opinion, I think that that's very different from the opinion of someone who likes to listen to music. It's not that that person's opinion is not important or that there's not things that you can learn from somebody who is a music lover, but the things that they tell you are going to look different. And I think one is actually probably going to be able to help you get better, whereas the other one is just kind of general information to take into account. We put a lot of stock nowadays into what people on social media say, and I think it's important to look at why is something successful. Let's say that that person did write something and it did do very well. We see this with celebrities all the time. It's not to say celebrities aren't capable of writing something that's good, but did they do well with that book because they're already famous, or did they do well with their book because it's a really good book? They already have an established fan base that's going to be interested in basically anything they do. So, yes, I would say go for it. Listen to what people have to say, just so you have that information. But also look at the information that other writers, professional writers, are often giving you for free. This leads into the last point, which is, should readers charge aspiring writers to give them their opinions? I think there is a conversation that we could have, because currently beta reading is something that people do voluntarily. And at the end of the day, it is somebody who is pouring a lot of time into something and giving their feedback for completely free. I understand there perhaps being like this is how much we're going to pay you for anybody that wants to beta read this work. I think that brings in a lot of additional walls, though, for self-published books, because we already talked about how sometimes self-published books, people just aren't financially able to make it as polished, and they're sort of punished for that in how people approach self-published books. And so we already kind of got into that, and I think if it became an established thing to pay beta readers, you're just making it even harder to have self-published books have a chance. But again, that's a whole other conversation we could dive into. I understand that if somebody's going to be reading somebody's work and they want to charge, it makes sense that they want to charge for their time. However, I'm going to be very upfront in saying I have a huge issue with people charging as much as a professional editor. I think that if you're somebody who is an avid reader and you want to provide the option for somebody to hand you their manuscript and for you to give them your opinions as a reader, sure. If it takes you 10 hours to finish a work, then I understand that you want to be compensated for that 10 hours. That's a lot of time. That's more than a workday, right? For the average person. Being a professional editor is a highly skilled profession. It's something that people go to school for. It's something people get certifications in. And from the experience that I have in working with a professional editor, I don't know that every professional editor does this, but there's kind of a standardized, this is how much we're going to charge per the amount of words in this manuscript, and that makes sense. But I see sometimes people charging essentially those same amounts when they are not qualified, and this is coming full circle, and it's making me, it really hits at something that I have a huge problem with, that I established at the beginning. I do not like the idea of people spending a lot of money on something that is not actually worth their money. It's not a professional. And if you are paying thousands of dollars to somebody who is just someone who likes to read, if you want to do that and you have the means, that's whatever you want to do with your money, I suppose. But I just think that money could go toward an actual professional. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think that this borders on the lines of being a little bit of a scam. And so if you are somebody who is looking to have your book professionally edited and you see people offering to edit something and their rates are in line with what you've seen for professional editors, just maybe look into their credentials. Look into what experience they have. If their experience is, I like to read books, again, you can do whatever you want with that money, but I wouldn't advise that you do. And again, I understand the irony of me saying I don't think readers should give writers advice, and here I am giving advice. I understand that irony, but your hard-earned money should go towards something that is actually going to benefit you. Going back to the music example, private violin lessons are very expensive. It is a very specialized skill. And you would not pay that same amount of money to somebody who likes to listen to music. I don't think you should, in general. I don't think you can, but I don't think if you are trying to get lessons for yourself, or if you're trying to get lessons for your kid, you are not going to be getting the most out of your money. I want to clarify that I don't think that everybody is just out to make a quick buck. I think it's just maybe not even something that they realized, maybe I shouldn't be charging this much. Maybe this is just not something that they've considered. They've seen other people do it and they're like, well, those people do it, I could do it. I just think that this is perhaps a practice that is becoming more and more normalized, and the more normalized it's becoming, the more uncomfortable it makes me. And I thought I would let you know why. But I think there's also plenty of other opinions on this topic. If you have thoughts on this, please feel free to articulate what you feel. And I hope all of you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.